Not and with a wet palette. I didn't think you used them at all.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. Welcome to Reaper Miniatures Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne. Also, aka Painting Big in the chat this morning. It's good to see you all. I'm having an excellent morning. I hope you all are having a good morning too. Kiri looks happy.
Morning, everyone.
Reaper Collins is a what is that darn Pokemon?
It's a Gengar.
Gengar. Yeah, one of the most evil of Pokemon. Why am I not surprised, Reaper Collins? See, whereas Justin defaults to Angel, apparently, because my right ear is just more convenient for my ear jack. Collins definitely defaults to Devil. Good morning, good morning. Morning, everybody. Or as we just say, bon matin, tout le monde, right? That's French for to the world. So, tout le monde, good morning. Yes, good morning. Exactly. All right, cool. You know what? Part of me thinks I have to pause for a second. I just realized it's very warm here under these lights, and I have not turned on the ANC. 1 second, stream. It's one of those blooper mornings. It's not usually this stuffy in here in the morning, but I think it is supposed to be warmer today. And it was warmer yesterday. So let me put my jack in. Here's my Justin. Gotta have my Justin in my ear. Can't do anything without Justin in my ear. All right. There we go.
What are you guys doing?
Sorry, Planer, I didn't have the BRB flag up because it wasn't a dog emergency. I needed to turn on the AC because it's warm in here. Or I'm warm. One or the other, right? Same difference. Hello, everybody. Hello. All right, so today is exciting. And actually, is Margaret here on the road to Tiamat? I've not seen Margaret. But anyway, I decided to kind of jump ahead and do an AMA question today in addition to what I was doing. Margaret asked, I think it was Margaret, to kind of demonstrate pinning and talk about pinning. So I'm actually was going to pin something onto this turtle, so I was going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about OSL, and I'm probably only going to have time to talk about it in very general terms, but wanted to just kind of discuss it, because since there is a lantern on this model, it is an obvious talking point, but it also is fraught with peril, the way the lantern is put on this model. It's not a good subject for OSL, even though you might think it is. Not every model with a lantern or a light source is a good model for OSL. Some of them could be very troublesome and difficult and not really look great because of the positioning of the light source. So we're going to talk about that. Let's see here. Every day is exciting or full of bloopers and blorfs. Twisted Homa. Alrighty. So, I think we're good. We've got a J. I don't see a Margaret. It's going to be sad if we cover her question. I'm going to have to tell her tomorrow or on the Patreon to come and watch the first part of this. All right, well, let's get to it, because we got a couple of things that we want to talk about today. So, boing. I'm just going to start putting a boing sound when we go to Reaper Cam. All right, mini cam, rather. Here we are. Yes, Blorf, exactly, Planer. So we have our happy little pack turtle, and as you all know, he has a lantern, and the lantern pugs in here, and that is a beautiful, as far as composition goes, as far as the pleasingness of this composition, that's a nice thing, right? It kind of balances it out. It creates a dynamic angle here. It's a very neat little piece of negative space off here. There implies there'd be a rider here. All of these things. However, I decided that this does not make a lot of sense to me and that I would not want to paint OSL on the back of this turtle. Well, that's what we're talking about now, Griggy. All right. So this is a bad OSL mini is what I'm talking about. First of all, if you painted it this way, you'd have to backlight everything. Like your light source is on the rear of the turtle. And usually what you want is your focal point to be on the front of the turtle. So right away, you've got a problem. The brightest thing here is this, and you've got a big issue here. So it's not ideal for that reason. Why would you paint? You'd have to paint everything backlit. All of your light would be back here, and the front of the turtle might be in shadow. So you essentially, that's why it's a bad OSL mini. It's also kind of a bad OSL mini because your light source is way up here, and it's strung off this pole, so the only thing it's going to really affect is this pole. It's hanging off the back of the model. A lot of the light isn't even going to get to the turtle, so this is not really good. If you wanted a better light sourcing, you'd want something closer. Light sources are always best when you can do them closer, or even if they're right up against the model. There's a Templar model, I don't remember, he's one of the early ones, but he's got his sword essentially down, and it's against his cape and his front of his tabard. That's a perfect OSL model for a glowing sword, because when the light source is up against something, it's the easiest OSL to do, because then you could just create a bright light right around that light source and use the model itself as a backdrop, and it telegraphs perfectly. The hardest thing to do is a light source that's up and out and away, because you lose all of your most intense light here. You automatically lose, because the way light works is it's most intense right around its source, and then it fades out exponentially, and I mean exponentially, literally exponentially, as it gets farther away. So by the time that light reaches the turtle, it's almost not there. And the only time that it would appear strong is if the turtle was in darkness. So that's what you're dealing with. That's why that's a kind of a good versus bad. So to fix some of our concerns with this, I essentially can use the pommel of this saddle, which actually made sense to me as a turtle light projection area, and move the light out ahead of the turtle, which kind of makes more sense anyway, because then if you're, riding the turtle, you want to be able to see, right? So we can move it like essentially to here. And then it's also kind of like the carrot, the horse and the carrot, right? But at least then turtle and rider can see. And it doesn't solve the problem of the light source being like way, way far away from the turtle, but it does actually get it a little closer to stuff that's, by tilting it a little, I can get it a little closer to the turtle's head so that at least we can light some things around here. If I really want to make it even more applicable, I could shorten, I could clip off. And it's nice too, because Jason has essentially, sculpted little bits here. You could, at any of these little bulbs, which are actually, I think, bamboo bits, or reeds at any point, at any of these little bulbs, you could snip this off and make it shorter. And in fact, you want to snip off probably the first part, because this last part here is totally featureless except for the notch that normally makes it fit in here. So, yeah. So you really don't need any of this. You can clip it off. And we will clip it off. Just to bring our light source a little bit. Possible. I put him away, but I would be surprised unless it fits like, if this part fits right into the hand, I guess. But either way, you could do that as well, D. Clearman. Yep, you could chop off the lantern and you put a fish, because it is a cool little lantern. I mean, no doubt. I wish we could get it as a bit, because it is neat. It's a cool little kind of pseudo-oriental lantern. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about pinning. We're going to pin it here so that it's out in front of the turtle and looks a little cooler. I'm going to pin this. I'm going to clip this at an angle, because as you saw, I kind of wanted it to be at an angle. I'm going to kind of make sure that I've got it flat on my hand when I'm doing that, so I get the correct angle. So we're going to come at it with the side cutters. With flush cutters, you always want these beveled parts away from the area, like in the trashy. So I want to lose this. So since I want to lose this part, that's where the beveled areas are going to be. And you want the flat side flush with what you're going to be using, so that you can create a nice, clean cut. So we'll start clipping only a little bit off. Then we'll kind of test it and see if that's an angle that we like. Now, as you see, this actually sits very nicely on top of this little turtle head on the saddle pommel, which is a very nice detail, by the way, Jason. He is not in here, but if he ever watches this video, you'll see that I'm very pleased. I kind of like this. This is actually pretty good. I think this angle is going to be good, but I definitely don't want to just glue this onto the turtle head, even though it appears to be really flush. You could, and it might bond and melt together. Sometimes with super glues, they will actually kind of melt the bones material, and it'll be very, very sturdy. But let's pretend we're doing this with metal, and we definitely want this sturdy. Then we would need to pin it. Oh, anybody. I mean, you could try OSL at any point, Gurgi. The two things that will make your OSL good, though, are understanding the way light works and being able to blend at least a little. Because you need to get that gradient of the light falling away. And that can be rough. Although, even if you get it in roughly, even if you can't blend, if you have your highlights in the right place, it will look right. So that's why I think people should try lighting earlier rather than later. You don't have to wait to have a perfect blend. It'll help you, like, make realism, but it isn't necessary. You can learn lighting without, and practice it without being perfect at blending. And you probably should, so that you can start getting your mind wrapped around that sort of lighting effect, like the overhead or directional lighting effect. All right, so here's a pin vise. Pin vise, the dreaded pin vise. Let's make sure we're focused. Oop. All right. So I use a very small bit. A very, very, very small bit. The reason I do this is that I can pin everything with it, including really narrow things like this, and I don't have to swap out the bit. I'm a lazy person. I like to grab my pin vise and just use it. I don't like to have to swap out bits. I'm not that precision. I have found in my, I hate to say this, but 30 almost? Yeah, over 30 years of miniatures. God. But I have found in my long and illustrious career, let's just put it that way, that I don't need any other bit. The only thing you need a super heavy bit for is if you're doing something like trying to pin a bust, like you want to make a kind of a cool thick pillar for your bust. If you're putting your bust on a special base, then you want to use a thicker wire. Otherwise, the only way you would ever need to pin something with a really thick wire is if it's a big, heavy, like dragon wings, right? And even then, if they're plastic, you don't need it. It's only with big metal dragons, which now are a vanishing breed, unless you find an old one somewhere. Only big metal dragons have metal wings anymore, because they tend to bend and distort, so, right? So anything big, heavy, and metal, you may need a heavier pin to pin. But anything smaller, a small pin works just fine. You just don't have... I hope it's a brilliant career, Dwarf Mind. Sometimes it's been a blooper-filled career, which I suppose is brilliant in its own way if you're going for comedy. Yeah, so, and hello, by the way. Will it blend? Everything can blend, Valandar. You just have to, futz with it enough. But yeah, so I use a small bit, and you can order drill bits by size if you go to Rio Grande Hobbies. That's the place where Reaper and thus I always ordered our micro supply, our miniature supplies from. And you can order drill bits, and they're like a number sign and then a number, and usually they're in the 70s, 60s, and 80s, I think. I don't remember the exact range, but this is a number 75 drill bit, and you can order them in sets of like little tiny tubes, and you can get 10 at a time, which is great because when you're starting, you might break the tip off, and you'll need backups. They are a little bit fragile, but they're not as bad as you'd think. The key is to use very light pressure, and especially when you're pinning something that's plastic, you don't need much pressure to drill into it. It's a lot harder to drill into metal, but you also don't need to go very far. Like, I'll probably, if I can get like this much, like, I guess that's probably 2 millimeters. If I can get 2 millimeters into this pole, that's a good seat for a pin. And then I'll leave another 2 millimeters sticking out. Blurf career. Do you even blend, dude? Yeah, well, Europe would be up in arms against you, Rathmore, because they have the F blending movement, or F smoothness movement over there. I don't like it when, I know David makes fun of me for this, but I don't like it when, one sector of mini painting, disrespects another, even if it's meant in comedically. I know they didn't mean it like that, but it's just kind of gets a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, I like smoothness when it's appropriate, and I like texture when it's appropriate, and I just don't think that, implying that one is better than the other is any way to go. Because although you start out, saying F smoothness as a, hey, get away from smoothness and try something new. But the attitude of the phrase is not that. And as time goes on, people will forget the original meaning. And as they do, they will, go into camps like humans do, right? And then they'll be like, oh, smoothness sucks, right? That's the natural progression. So you got to watch what comes out of your mouth and the way you say it, in my opinion. Otherwise, your original meaning may be misinterpreted as time goes on. So yeah, excellent. So I just wanted to clean up that mold line real quick. All right, so the way that we start with pinning, let me make sure. Oh yeah, sorry, Trouble. Trouble has reminded me that I've missed an integral part of pinning, although I was going to talk about it when I got a little further. But okay, so Ta-da! The movement is F. I won't say the bad word on Reaper stream, but F smoothness Rathmore is the movement. And like I said, it was started with the best intentions. It was started because everybody was doing smooth, but textures are so much fun and awesome. And the smooth people were kind of looking down at the texture people. And so they all were like, no, every surface has a texture of some sort. And if the model is big enough, you can represent it. And even on tiny models, you can somewhat represent it. So that they started the F smoothness movement to kind of like get, hey guys, you know, every surface is textured except for like smooth plastic or metal, and even then sometimes. So let's do some textures. But like I said, when you have a kind of an incendiary title like that, yes, it gets you attention, but then down as time goes on, people get the reverse problem going on, right? Where they look down on smoothness, where they're like, oh, well, it's smooth, but you haven't done anything with it, you know, that sort of thing. I just don't like any catchphrase that's gonna bite you down down as time goes on, right? It's better to just teach people that, hey guys, there's two awesome ways to do this, and to think about it, and there's two awesome, you know, ways to blend with textures or with smooth. And so, you know, but I'm a very open-minded person, so I don't like anything that comes off as dissing or antagonistic in this hobby. I don't give any play to. So, all right, so you can use any wire, but over time I've used brass rod, and sometimes I buy the long rods that are, you can get them in a lot of hobby stores as like long packages of brass rod. But I found that beading wire, which also is a brass or coated aluminum, depending on what you get, beading wire is really convenient. It's not real long, so I don't lose it. I can keep it in this little package, and you can just get this at Michael's, honestly, or even you can order it online if you want. What you do is when you order your drill bit, and you don't have to get a number 75, but if you look up how many millimeters is a number 75 drill bit, it'll tell you 0.52. Then you look on the back of your package, and you look and you see this is 0.51. So you know that your drill bit is ever so slightly bigger than your wire, and that's perfect. So whatever, you should almost go to like a hobby store or order a couple different types of wire. Look at the millimeters that they're equivalent to, and they've got an inch too. And then go online and look up, like, what's a number 76 drill bit? What's a number 78? What's a number, 69 or 70? And essentially just find a couple of drill bits, maybe of different sizes if you don't want to just go my way. And make sure, pick one that is just a little bit bigger than your wire. So if you like a little bit thicker wire than this, if you end up going for say, I think, what is it? Is it 20 gauge that's bigger? I think the smaller gauges are larger wire. But I don't remember. Anyway, always make sure you look at your wire, and then you order a drill bit that's just a tiny bit bigger. And if you want it to be a little significantly bigger, you can even then have a little bit of wiggle room in your hole, but it doesn't set as well. So keep that in mind. So yeah, essentially this is so easy and so inexpensive to get to. This wire was maybe $2, and it's going to last me forever because it's a ton. So yeah, that's how you do it. You just look. Most wires will tell you what gauge they are. If not, you can always Google it. Google 24 gauge wire in inches or millimeters, and that you can find the information. So I've got my happy little wire. I'm going to sniff off a tiny bit with my side cutters. The reason I do not use paper clips. Thanks. That's what I thought, Graymail. Thanks for hey, Paul John's Life. Been a while since I've seen you. Yeah, I mean, just make sure that it is actually soft metal. So this is the key here, guys. This is the key here. Hobby cutters. These are Fancy Schmancy Games Workshop cutters, but any hobby cutter that you use, I don't even have another one around, is rated only for very soft metals. So anything you pick up at Michael's or Hobby Lobby is going to be soft metals. That means things like aluminum or brass or copper. You are not going to want to use them on any spring steel, which is what many paper clips are made of. Most paper clips, I dare say. Because they need a certain hardness in paper clips in order for them to have this, to hold together, to not distort easily. So the problem with that is when you take your happy little pliers and you apply it to a spring steel paper clip, you're going to notice little divots popping up. You're essentially destroying your side cutters. So you need to use an actual hardware store wire cutter to cut through spring steel paper clips. Do not destroy your side cutters. Okay, that's good to know. Memory wire. Makes sense, right? If it's got a memory, then it's probably going to be harder because it needs to keep its shape, right? Because it's got a memory. So that's easy to remember. So memory wire is harder, also, according to Graymail. So always pick soft. That's why I go with beading wire, because it's meant to be kind of sculpted and bent. And you know, if it's coiled into something like this, it's probably meant to be bent and straightened out. So that way you don't destroy your side cutters. Also, it can be dangerous to use this sort of thing on spring steel. I saw in my time working at the hobby shop, and actually David had this happen just the other day to him, and it was really good that he was wearing eye protection. But you can actually have these shear. Like, they will actually break and fling your cutters. The steel of your cutters can actually shear and send a piece flying. They are not made to be used on that hard of a material, and one side, the softer side, is going to give. So a piece sheared off and flew off, and when I saw this in a hobby store, they actually brought it in to show me, and I asked what they've been trying to cut, and the kid showed me a paper clip, and I'm like, yeah, you're trying to cut steel with something that's a softer grade steel, and the one gave, you know. But it can be very hazardous. If you aren't wearing eye protection, you could get some serious injury out of that. So be careful. Cannot emphasize this enough. Use a tool for the material it is graded for. Yeah, so yeah, quite surprising when it happens, right, Graymail? But you just gotta hope you're not hurting yourself, because that's sharp metal flying. Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly, Methophile. So yeah, be careful. This is serious stuff. Use it for softer metals. So yeah, that said, now that I've gotten over that and yelled at you all and very firmly in a mom-like way told you to be careful because I care about you, then now I'm going to strip it. And I usually do cut off a little extra because I just don't know how long I'm going to want my pin to be. But usually just a little bit. So maybe, keep your thing. Uh-oh, did I lose it? I was trying to show you guys. Ah, there we go. So what I will admit that what I usually do is drill the hole, just stick the wire into it straight off the roll with the glue so that it, so I don't lose it. But here I wanted to show you guys. So I'm gonna pick it up. And so it's just a little, I'll compare it to my, my little thing here. So yeah, that's about right. It's about 2 millimeters in, 2 millimeters out. And then if I need it to be safe kept and not lose it, I'll just put it right there. I'll put my wire into my little pallet. Like I said, the other way I do it is I drill in and then I just stick part of this into it and then I clip it off right off the roll. That's another good way to do it. When you're going to drill, whether you're doing plastic or metal or resin or whatever, yeah, please do, Sharky. It's just, a lot of people do it and they're lucky for a while, but you just don't want that one bad accident to happen to you. I take an X-Acto knife, and you don't have to have a scalpel blade like this to have this work. Any sharp X-Acto knife will do. Kind of center it, get it kind of in the middle. And this is easier with plastic, because of course it's soft, but you also can do it with metal. So I've got it right there in the middle. I'm going to press down slightly. I'm going to spin the knife just a few times. What this does is it drills a tiny little starter hole into your metal, plastic, or resin, so that then when you go to insert the tip of your little screw, it sticks and it doesn't wobble around and it doesn't run away from you. So this is key. Yeah, some wire shears are rated for steel. Yes, exactly. Right, exactly. You want to, if you're going to be cutting paper clips, just indulge and get yourself a regular old wire cutter from the hardware store. Tell them you need it rated for spring steel. You know, you want a smaller cutter that's rated for spring steel, and just do it. We have an actual wire cutter in the house that we can use for that in David's toolkit. So, you know, just use the right thing for the right thing. So then you hold your pin vise with the butt of it is in your palm. And I like this one, but just choose a pin vise. If you have the opportunity to try a couple different brands, like maybe that your friends have, try to find one that's comfortable for your hand is the key here. Because you're going to be kind of torquing, you know, you're kind of contorting your hand around it. So you want it to be comfortable. You're also going to be putting pressure on it. You don't want hand cramps. And then you just use your fingers to turn. And I am like, at this point, I am just pretty much pushing just a little bit. Just a little bit. That's about as much pressure as I've got. You do need to press a little bit to make sure that the tip goes and starts drilling. And if I kind of turn it and I'm not getting much, then that's either my drill is dull or I'm just not pressing hard enough. So let's try it again. This time I'm going to press a little harder. This time if I let my hand go, I'm pressing quite hard. Now I can see little threads starting to come out of the hole. Perfect. So my drill bit tip may be slightly dull, but it's still good enough to drill through this. After you've drilled in just a tiny bit, check your angle, especially on a very thin thing like this. You want to make sure that your drill bit isn't angling to where it's going to punch out the other side of the item. So you want it to be going pretty straight up and down from all angles. And here we're a little bit close to that end, but I think I'm going to be okay because I'm only planning to drill in a little bit. Good morning, Otter Mama. Yeah, that's the problem. A lot of friendly local game stores teach you to use paper clips for pinning, but really, it's not true. They're doing you a disservice. They say that because it's something that almost everybody has around the house. But I find that brass rod is far more ideal for pinning. Not only is it super cheap and it's much easier to cut and safer to cut, it comes in so many more sizes so that you can, when you have to pin something tiny, what are you going to do with a big paper clip? You can't do it. So that's why I think that I wish that local game stores would stop saying that. I wish that the hobby people would stop saying that. And then people go out and they use the wrong cutters to cut their paper clips. So if you were smart and bought the right cutters, awesome, Francis. But yeah, it's not ideal in my opinion. I'm always a fan of use the thing for the thing that is meant to be. So it's like a paper clip is meant to clip paper. And brass rod is meant to be used in all sorts of craft purposes, including this one. All right, so now I'm going to pull that out and clean my clean the bits of plastic, the little twirls of plastic, off of my pin vise. And with metal, that is exceptionally important because if you keep going, those metal threads are just going to clog, and you risk breaking your pin vise, your drill tip. So you really want to clear that hole. Pull that pin vise out, then drill back in. Pull it out and drill back in. Usually pulling it out is enough to kind of clear it, but you can use your finger. I'm getting little threads you can see still there. Put it back in. And then the other thing you can do is you're drilling the correct way, but if you have a lot of metal threads, you can also drill in reverse, and that will back your drill out and pull the threads out naturally. And you may need to do that to get those threads out when you're doing a pesky metal model. So let's just do that a little bit more. And I think now I'm going to test my fit. So you can use a pliers, or you can use your side cutters, or I have these surgical forceps, which are way cool, and I don't use them enough, so I'm going to use them for this. And I'm going to put my wire in and test my fit. There it goes. So right now, if I push on it, it's pretty firm. Like, I'm not knocking it out of there. It seems to have a good amount of strength. I can pull the plastic around. So that's good. That tells me that I've got a good depth, that I'm not going to have problems. I can glue this. Twisted Doma, the number 75 drill bits that I get from Rio Grande Hobbies are orderable in packs of 10. So I don't mind ordering them online. In fact, it's just dangerous because Rio Grande has so many awesome hobbying supplies. It's one of those places. So I just order them. Like when I'm down to 2, I'll just order a new pack. So I don't have to leave the house even. Yeah, and there you go. Like a lot of good hobby stores, especially you probably might have more luck at airplane, model railroading places. I had to go to a model railroad store when I was out in Baltimore. They had packs of tiny drill bits that they would sell you individual numbers of. But yeah. Malleability, not really for this kind of thing. You want it to be stiff enough to hold up on this Mathophile. If you're gonna use brass rod to make your own sculpting tools and stuff like that, well then yeah, sure. But with this little guy, you aren't really necessarily wanting it to pull or push or distort at all. So all right, now let's glue that in. I don't usually use a gel super glue for this. I use Zap-A-Gap. This is the medium, so it's fluidy. You can kind of see the fluid in the bottom of the bottle there. So this version of Zap-A-Gap, and this is kind of the consistency I really like. This version is not a super precise, super fluid version, so it doesn't go everywhere. It is kind of halfway between a gel and a really fluid super glue. It is a gap filler also, so that's kind of useful sometimes, but I like it because I don't like really runny super glues. I just find they're very hard to control. If you've got the ones with the fine applicator tip, then you're pretty good. And because this Zap-A-Gap comes with a fine applicator tip also, but usually I don't need it. Uh-oh, I'm dropping things. No! No, can't drop things. All right. There we go. All right. So I will grab my little pin out. Grab a little piece of, put a tiny piece of glue. And the key here is keep your super glue bottle level, by the way, like more or less. Just get a little bit of glue on the end. There, then you can control it. You're not dumping it out. It's not going to drop a huge drop onto anything. Use gravity. Use gravity to control things. Oh no! Danger! The worst is when your pin gets covered in glue and then it wants to stick to you more than it wants to go into the plastic. All right, and I'm gonna tamp it down. Make sure we got it. Use it kind of like a hammer. Use my pliers. There, and we got it nice and firm. And that is a close enough fit that it should pretty much be good right out of the gate. Like it should be frozen almost perfectly right away. Now, yeah, exactly. Somewhat, Francis. Somewhat. You've got a little bit of bending room. Yes, you're right. You would have to fill a gap probably then if your fit wasn't good. If you had to bend it. But you could play with it a little bit more, yes. And a paper clip, you're right. A spring steel paper clip would not have that amount of give. So, put my glue to the side for a second. Now we have to kind of use imagination, right? How are we going to line this sucker up? We have to figure it out. And for that, we're going to use visual math. Haha. We're going to imagine that we're shooting an arrow into this turtle head, and we need it to come down to here. So we're kind of going to superimpose these two things and make a judgment call about the angle we want the wire to go in at and where we want it to line up. And then we're going to go, all right, extrapolate then right about here, right behind the eye is where I want the hole to actually go in. And I'm going to have to drill it at an angle, probably the same angle that the back of the head here is at. So if I just remember that, I'll be close, maybe a little bit more upright. You can always use green to fill and adjust. You also want to keep an eye, though, on where your lantern is, right? So let's look at this. This is actually a little bit of a tricky pin, but not terribly. So if we put the wire just behind the turtle's eye, on the turtle on the pommel here, turtle head, then we can line it up really well. It goes right down through the middle of the head. And we're kind of aiming for this bit of saddle. Like if I put this down flat, right behind the eye, it lines up pretty well with that piece of saddle. So I'm going to remember this is the angle I need. I need to drill in right behind the eye and go down toward there. And to kind of mark that in my head, I'm going to grab a bottle of bright red. You could use any bright color, but I was taught to use bright red. Let me see. There's a good one. Oh, dear Dragonite, yeah. Elevern, we have not gotten there yet. It's pinning an OSL, but we are positioning our lantern. If you go back and watch the VOD here, I'm not going to go back into it, but I talk about why the position of this lantern as it was sculpted is not a good subject for OSL. So you can go and get that after the fact. But I will be doing a bit. If I can get my budding gear here, we're taking up a lot of time on pinning because I'm getting a lot of questions. But I can at least map it out. So I'm going to use some bright red. Clear red in this case. But any red will work. Or any bright color will work that you can see against the bones material. I usually just put a tiny bit on the tip of the bottle. So that I can just dip a little bit of my pin in it. Then I'm going to go back down. Kind of like, you know, imagine where I want it. Okay, there's my line. Go up to the top of the head and drop a drop. Oh, my paint dried out. Gotta be faster. There. There's a tiny little red dot. Oh no. Man, this is not working very well today. What is it? What is it? There. All right, so I've got a line, but same thing. That gives me a guide as to where I want to do this. If you're doing an arm, if you're doing a head, if you're doing anything with pinning, this works. You just kind of visually line it up. Make sure you've got it exactly where you want it. and then put a little drop down. Sometimes, like today, I've got cold air blowing on me from the AC, so it's probably drying this tiny bit of paint before it even gets to the model, but you get the idea. If you are in a more human setting, then you will have more success with it. So I know that I need to hit the middle of this dash with my pin vise, and I know that I need to aim when I'm drilling down, I need to aim for the front part of the saddle here, because that's the right angle. Yeah. Yeah, debonder is a good thing to have on hand. This is true. And acetone. This is all true. All of this works. I used to always keep super glue debonder around, but lately I've been good enough with it, knock on glass, that I haven't felt the need to keep it around. All right, so what I can do now, remember what we did the other way? We actually put down our knife and made a divot. So now we have a dash that's our guide. So we kind of want to, center our knife in between on the head. I think that's the center point of the head. That's what I'm going to guess. That's about right. Gently lean into it and turn your knife around. That's what it's all about. There. Now we've got a nice divot in the top of our turtle head, exactly where we want to do. Actually, Grim, yeah, the Elmore Green Witch is one of the ones that is easy to start with. Because her wand is right up against her dress, so it's a good subject. Oop, I've got a little bit of extra plastic. So now we have to, look at our angle, right? So you're going to set your pin vise in the divot that you made on the top of the turtle head. Let's get up there. Find our divot. There's our divot. Ah! Divot, divot. All right. Divot. Set in our divot. But we don't want to go straight down, right? Because we're going to go right through his head, and it's not going to be at the right angle. So remember to move your pin vise so that it's at the right angle. Now very gently, very gentle pressure at first, because since you're not going straight down, since you've chosen to go at an angle, your seating mechanism, that little hole you drew, that you just drilled to set this pin vise tip, is a little bit more shallow at this angle. So gotta start very gently so that you get the correct angle. Then once you get a nice divot going on, you can pull it out. There's my little hole. It's a little bit off from my red, but we'll see if we can still make it work. You're never going to get it perfect, but you just got to get it close enough. Otherwise, though, I like that. So we'll just keep drilling it down a little bit more. But now's the point. See, we've got enough hole in there, but we can still correct it by pressing on our pin vise. So what we want to do is we want to check if we've got the right angle. So we insert it, we put it down, and we're checking positioning. You can see that I still have a long way to drill. Now is the time to check this, because we can alter the angle if we have to at this point. But if we get really deep, it's going to be much harder to do that. So we're looking at this. We're seeing if I press this straight down, is it going to come down flat on top of his head? It looks like it will. Is my lantern where I want it, out in front of the beast? Yes, it is. So, okay, that's a good position. And I think that's going to be a good, it's more or less lined up. We can twist it a little bit. See, you do have a little bit of give. But I do see that I need to trim the bottom of this a little bit too. All right, so that's pretty good. We're going to go with it. We are going to go. See, and if you wanted to change it at this time, by the way, you would essentially alter the angle that you drill in at right at the top. Like you wouldn't push your drill bit all the way down to where you previously went. You would insert it in this hole and essentially use it to create a new pocket. And you still have enough room right here to drill and alter at the top of this. And your hole isn't deep enough to have compromised a lot of plastic. So you can change it at this point if you wish to. Make sure my angle is correct. Keep drilling. Oh, got lots of threads now. Take them off of your vise. When you're drilling in a soft plastic, it's a lot less risky that you're going to break a drill bit tip. But if you torque it too much, you will. So be careful of your pressure. Use enough pressure, but don't like really be on it, you know. And don't just be like holding it there. It won't drill in of its own accord. You do have to put pressure on it. Let's check it again. Always check throughout your process. Make sure. Yeah. There we go. That lines up, actually, pretty nicely. We're a little bit, this side is a little bit extra, so I may need to use some putty. I can also bend it a little bit if I want. Make it more even, but that didn't look quite as well right, actually. The way the lantern is hanging, it is a little off kilter. So I may need to fix my lantern and bend it a little bit. Luckily, bones is bendable. That's all right. I'm okay with that. I'd have to do some green work, but I can do it. And you expect that kind of when you pin, is you're going to need to do a little bit of green work, a little bit of adjustment, a little bit of filling, a little bit of trimming, a little bit of everything. So I can also just go in and use my knife and trim some parts that I noticed were off center a little bit. There. And this side is a little bit too wide, so I can trim it back just a little. And same here. Trim the sides down a little bit, gives you more room for green work. All right. Then we can put this back in, and I think we're almost ready to glue it. There. Yay! All right, cool. I'm going to glue that. Or actually, maybe I'll hold off gluing it and just use it as it is. All right, so let's talk about OSL. I'm going to be base coating this turtle while we talk about OSL. All right, thanks, Dark Angel. All right, I'm looking and making sure everybody is, all right, making sure everybody's questions are answered here. So I'm just going to paint him a dark gray blue. Here's the deal, folks. So with OSL, with a light source that is far away from the model, like this is relatively far away from the model. It's not right up against the model, right? I'm going to add some blue. If this was bright daylight, and actually David talked about this in his stream last Friday, if you remember. If this was bright daylight, if this turtle was in the sun, guess what? You wouldn't even get a light source up here. Wouldn't matter. The sun is so much brighter than the lantern that no lantern light would hit this turtle. So if you are painting this turtle in regular colors, like he is out under the daylight sun or under a relatively bright light source, chances are you aren't going to get any OSL here unless you do a tiny bit here on the lantern pole. That's just the way the light is. If it's a magical lantern, you can get away with a little bit, maybe, but it'll look wrong. So if you really want this lantern light to be the main source of light or a strong glow to be coming from it, you want things to be dark. You want to have actually painted things a little bit like they're in shadow. So the turtle's outside in a very dark evening setting, perhaps, or in a dimly lit swamp town, you know, something without a bright light source. You can't like make the rest of the turtle look too bright. One way to do this, if you're trying to paint something as if it's in the dark, is just to put a uniform coat of a darkish bluish gray or a purplish gray or whatever grayish you want, whatever grayish color you want to use. And then you can work up from there a bit. I actually almost used a wet palette for this. I was going to shock you all. I have one prepped. And this is the kind of thing that a wet palette is good for. I'm going to take my lantern off, and I'm getting my big fat brush. Maybe I have an even bigger, fatter brush. Yeah, I'm going to grab my flat. The flat just covers, it's a ripped up flat. I use it for mixing, but it just covers ground so much faster. So let's go with a dark color. And I could also have just primed this turtle black and done the zenith. I could even do the zenith light from this direction if you wanted, but I'm here on stream and I don't have an airbrush or a primer can, and I'm not going to wait, so here we go. And we all know primers can be fraught with peril on bones anyway, so we're going to paint part of this turtle like he's in shadow. He's out in the evening twilight and his colors are somewhat dulled. He just needs a light source for you to see him brought to life. So we will shadow him and then we will bring in a light source. And I'm just going to roughly paint in everything. Yay, boom, 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 boom. Big, big, big. Any questions while I'm base coating Mr. Turtle? Ah! I'm going to throw Mr. Turtle around, apparently. Tomorrow, by the way, remember, guys, tomorrow is my AMA. You can see why I did the pinning lesson in this video instead of doing it in the AMA, because it would have sucked up 40 minutes of the AMA, and I didn't want that. Sometimes the questions I get in the AMA are just better explained in a stream. There we go. So, turtle convincingly in shadow. You can imagine him outdoors in the evening light. I put a little blue in my gray because I like that that coolness. The shadow color kind of recedes from the eye. It suggests that it's evening. There might be a little bit of blue light left in the sky, but that's about all there is. All right, so shadow. Right, so turtle in shadow. So imagine that the whole turtle is painted gray. We'll just go to this side. Very good. I got mine yesterday, Jimro Dog. Healthy. Yes, my love. I actually thought about using a wet palette for this part, but then I was in such a habit of using my well palette that I accidentally mixed my blue-gray here instead of mixing it on my wet palette. Let's see here. I'll prove it. There is a wet palette actually prepped and ready. I like it for fast painting. All right. Well, maybe we'll do it anyway. Maybe I'll put some of my paint on it. Well, it'll take up room though. Now it'll take up room. All right, I'll do it. Here, I'll do it. Here's the awful wet palette. Here, let me flip over my paper because the top part dried. Come on, paper, get wet. So this is parchment paper, baking paper, for those of you who bake. It's highly ironic that I use it for both purposes. There we go. All right. So I'm not a wet palette user, as you all know. However, if you are setting up something fast and you want to blend, wow, I need more water in this wet palette. It is not wet enough. Get wet. There. Stay wet. There. Awesome. Fantastic. Actually, you know it's mine, Grim, because it's not even a whole palette. I'm actually painting in the lid of it because I just forgot the other part somewhere and didn't care. So I never replaced it because I never use a wet palette. So I'm actually painting in a wet palette lid. Yes, absolutely. This is Anne. Welcome to Anne World. All right, let's get some white. Let's see here. I'm going to do some basic. Oh, I need to use my gray. I need to mix up a new source of gray on my wet palette. Wow, that's an alien phrase on my tongue. On my wet palette. See, now Alpha can essentially say, hey, you're doing it wrong. When I'm messing around in my wet palette. Because I'm so out of practice with using it. Yeah, I'm doing it wrong because I'm putting the colors really close together and I'm not keeping them in separate puddles. That's because I just want this gray mix. I don't want it to be different every time I do it. I just want it to be there. I'm such a well palette painter. I even paint on a wet palette like I'm not using a well palette. And then I get grumbly because it takes forever to mix things. Because you're not supposed to mix paint like this on a wet palette. Seriously. I am using it wrong. Folks. Totally. And then I get sad because I don't have, you know, the side of my well that I can clean my brush off on. And yeah, I'm just sad. I'm just pathetic on this. Hey, my well palette is not covered in paint from a decade of use, although it does have little bits here and there, and is also perfectly functional. So here we go. Wet palette versus well palette. Anne and David throw down. Disharmony in the home. Oh, I should be painting this white. Well, I'm going to paint it white, but first I'm going to paint it this way. To explain it. We must explainificate. Or whatever other fictional word Dr. Seuss says I can make up today. So let's imagine everything is in shadow. Shadow. It's very dark out. It's nice. It's a nice evening. The turtle's very happy to be out and on the road. But it's getting dark. And the turtle is dismayed because he cannot easily see things very well. Let's see. There we go. So it's time to light the lantern. There. Very Twilight turtle. Front part of turtle is in Twilight here. So first you ask yourself, well, where's my light coming from? And if you're Anne, the way I tend to do this all is to set this all up is with underpainting. It takes a little longer. Yeah, I could just reach for my yellows and go at it, but I tend to like to underpaint when I'm visualizing light because it doesn't come 100% naturally for me. At least my paint is drying super fast today. So first of all, you're asking what your light source is, and your light source is going to be bright white. You can make it colored, no problem, after that. But I started with bright white, sometimes because I'm not quite sure what color I might go for my light source. With here, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go yellow. But making it white really puts, makes me think about, where is this white going to go from here? And mostly painting in the precise areas that the white is going to go. So if you are just starting to think about OSL, first identify where is my light source? Where's my brush is more like the question right now. A wet well palette. No! Don't cross the streams, DDH. Let me see. Just making sure. House divided, right? The worst of both worlds. Yes, it's true. Do any of you do Mystery Science Theater? Two bad things that go worse together, right? Circus on Ice. Ah, dear. Excellent. Excellent. You guys make me laugh. I've always used well. Yeah. Well, that's good, Dogfather. That's what you should do. You should always give it a try. I mean, there have been various times in my life that I've made myself paint with the wet palette specifically just to give it a chance. I don't want to be closed-minded. I want to, it might be a great tool for me for certain things. So let's just block in. Oh, no. Well, that's okay. We blorfed, but the blorf is actually applicable, so we're going to leave the blorf. So I'm not really thinning my white paint at all. I mean, I put it onto the wet palette, so it might be getting a little bit of water leached into it, but it's not much. First, we're going to paint our white and identify our light source. Where is our strongest light source? This makes you break it down. Now, and this paint is still wet, sadly. Yeah, thank you, Paul John's Life. Is there a Gamera mini? Well, that would be the Dragon Turtle. Yes, Gamera is full of meat. So yeah. Oh no, well, okay, it's pretty solid on this side, so we'll go to this side. And I'm going to take my excess gray paint off before I try to paint white over the top of it. So once you have figured out your brightest color, where your light source is coming from, and here it might mostly comes from there, but it might also come from here. I think it's meant to be I don't know what that is, decorative band around the middle. Maybe it's wearing a corset. I have no idea at this point. I'm just feeling silly. This lantern has some silly factors to it, so now we are going to pretend that the light is also coming out of here, because why not? All right. We have a lantern. We have light. The turtle is like, yay, the lantern is on, but where does the light go? And how strong is the light? These are questions that are interesting. So the first thing you kind of do with OSL, if you're me, when you're kind of, don't have a great integral sense of how light moves, is you kind of draw lines. So right now, you know that the light here is going to be lighting up the underside of this lantern right here. And it's going to be lighting it up very strongly because it's right next to it. So you can pretty much use pure white or close to it for up here. The top underside of your lantern is going to be bright. Can you guys see that? That if the glow starts here, that anything right next to it, and that it's going to hit this underside. So that's going to be your first area that OSL shows up. Is that you can draw a direct line between your light source and the underside of this top rim of the lantern. So do so and make it lighter. And the closer the light source is to your item, the brighter it will be. So we will use pretty much a pure white there. Likewise, though, if you really look at it, the light's going to probably stop at this edge because it's going up and out, like so, right? The light radiates outward. Imagine how light goes, right? It radiates outward. But it's not going to hit things like this up here. There might be some reflected light that hits this up here on this edge, but the direct light source doesn't. Likewise, the direct light source doesn't reach up here, right? It can't go through this iron top on the lantern. Uh-oh. I did a piece that's not supposed to be light. So kind of just do it step by step. Don't let OSL intimidate you. Just think logically. It's like, all right, so then the light wouldn't hit up here because this is blocking it, right? See, draw a straight line, can't draw a straight line to this area. So you can draw a straight line, though, starting right around here. So that's where you can start to put more white in. But wait! Light starts getting dimmer exponentially as it goes away from its source. So now we have to ask a question. How bright is this lantern? How magical is this lantern? Because if this was a normal lantern, it would not be very bright once it got out here. It would probably be more like maybe there. Really dull. And as it gets further and further away, it would get darker and darker. Just a little bit of light. And this is very, very roughly blocked in. But so light starts very bright and then it dims as it gets further away. So when you get to the top of the turtle head then, you might only get, a little bit less white. And it would mostly be falling. Our lantern has gotten off center. Now, we have a problem though. Can you see it? It's that the bottom of this would actually block a lot of that light. So that's wrong. This is what I mean when I say when you have a light source that's complicated and it's far away from the model, it gets much harder to do OSL in a realistic manner. If this was just a glowing glass globe, like a magical glass globe, like on the end of a staff, it would be much easier, right? Because the globe would all be glowing, right? It would be sending light everywhere. But this bottom side of the lantern is in shadow. So the closest we can get is probably the back of his head. So see, wrong. No cookie. No cookie turtle, sorry. You don't even need to there is going to be reflected light. You're right, Twisted Oma, but it's not going to be strong. None of this is shiny. So that means not a lot of reflected light. So let's do the back of his head. Kind of draw a line. Once again, you don't even need to know vector or anything. You just need to be able to draw a line with your brush and say, can I draw a direct line from the light source to this? Can I? All right, good. Then I'm good. So then I can put in a light source. But remember, this won't be bright white. And also, the thing that light does, as it moves further away, is it diffuses, right? You don't get as bright of a light. James Gurney, who does Dinotopia, he's got an excellent video. I think it's painting dinosaurs, but he shows how you can take a tree branch, move it closer to the model and farther away from the model, and how it casts a stronger shadow that's more defined or a more diffused shadow. So this is far enough away that I probably need to just kind of blend this in, wet blend this in a bit. And this is where kind of blocking this in with wet blending can help, because it lets you fudge this line really easily. You don't need to be perfect. So you get a little bit of a diffused line there, because this is not right up against it. It's not going to cast a really sharp shadow from here. It's just going to, cast a slight light. Also, remember this light won't go all the way around the pole because it's on this side of the pole, right? So technically, right up the middle, you get a shadow. The back of this pole should be in shadow. Things to think about. These are just like the beginning steps. And obviously, we don't have enough time to go too much more into depth on this because I'm already exceeding 10:30. We've already been up an hour. But I want you guys to think about this, and maybe we'll come back on Monday and do a little bit more OSL. And so this is also not going to be a real sharp delineation. It's going to be probably a little blended, so we can grab some water, grab our wet palette color, and fudge that in. Since it's far enough away from the light source that it won't be a sharp demarcation, it'll just be blended in. So you see now, hopefully you see, how this is not a great OSL model. Because by the time your light hits the interesting part of the model, it is really diffused and it's not very bright. It's not going to cast, pick up a lot of detail. And so, and worse, you're attracting attention up here. You're not attracting attention down here. So that's another reason that it's not a great. Now, you will get some reflected light into the eye of the turtle. And you might get, let me draw a line here. You might get a little bit here. A little bit there. You can pick up little touches of it here and there. Anything shiny will have a much brighter, will pick up the candlelight or the lantern light much brighter. So like the tip of this little head here would pick it up brighter because it's going to be metal probably. So anything metal will pick up, metal or wet or shiny will pick up the color much more. But this is why this is not a great OSL Mini, even though you would think it is. If you had your lantern up against the turtle, like maybe stuck into the pack where it was like here, whereas kind of like at the left hand of the drayman's, when he's riding the turtle, that would be actually much better because you would have all of this light would be flooding all over behind the model and it would be bouncing off of all this stuff. So you could do a much brighter light source here. But up here, not so much, especially not with the shape of the light source and it being a lantern, so the light isn't coming out of the bottom of the lantern. Turtle want cookie. You don't even need a calculator, Trash. You just need to draw lines with your brush. Draw lines. Can your light source see this thing? Imagine your light source is an eyeball and ask if it can see the surface. If you can see the surface, then there's light on it. The farther away the light is, the dimmer the light is. Yes, it's how much of the light source. Yeah, and you're right, Math Files. How much of the light source will also differentiate how bright it is. I'm trying to give people really simple rules here so that it demystifies it just a little bit so you can try it, right? And by the way, if you did decide to OSL this and you wanted to color the light, then it's the easiest thing in the world to choose any color you want and glaze it over your white underpainting to get the effect. There's also the fact that colored light is going to color the surface it falls on. It's going to have an effect on the color of that surface, but we do not have enough time to touch on that right now. You should totally take David's OSL class if he does it for ReaperCon, because he will talk about how colored light changes color. So if we paint yellow and change it instantly, we change our light source to yellow. Painting over the white is really easy. And then we can also thin it down and glaze it. I already hit a little bit there because it's going to be fairly strong. Glaze it over what we did white to introduce yellow. And the yellow glaze will essentially color the white that you already put down, and you get a yellow-white light source instead of a white light source. Clear brights are great for this if you want magical colored light. Like magenta actually makes a fantastic magical light source. That's a little bit too bright. And I'm going a little bit heavier than a traditional glaze because, but yeah, just adding a little bit of a glaze of yellow gets you. It's hard to make good glazes for me with wet palette. I'm not as practiced as I am with well. So that lets you get a color to your light by just glazing over your underpainting. So essentially what it sometimes does for me is sometimes just with the underpainting and the white, it helps me visualize the light. It helps me kind of cross-check myself. If I hold it at arm's length, I can kind of see it. And then I still have time to adjust it before I start glazing colors over it. If I'm doing a miniature where the color is really going to be influenced, let's say we're doing like a red pole. Let's say this is a red lacquered pole. I would have painted the red pole at least to one level of highlights. If there's a natural light source. And then I would have done my OSL lighting, my white lighting, underpainting. Then I would glaze. But I would probably thin my white underpainting so that the red showed through it just like, it would with light. And then when I glaze the yellow over the top, you'd get kind of an effect. David does this effortlessly and makes it look easy. And for me, it's always been harder. So I always have to stop and check myself and think. And so I've developed a series of sets to essentially make myself, minimize mistakes for myself, I guess is the way to put it. But yes. So if you take nothing else away today, it should be that it's easier to paint OSL when the light source is closer to the figure, and that light will dim as it goes farther away from the figure, depending on how bright it is. A very, very bright light will take longer, it won't dim quite as fast, right? Because this is very, very bright. But the farther it goes away, the dimmer it should get. Draw a straight line from your light source to any surface to see if it can see, if the light source can see that surface, and then you know that light will hit it. Then you make a judgment call of how strong it will be, depending on how close it is. If you look at light sources, if you find pictures of them, I mean, keep in mind that a camera is almost never duplicates it exactly. But you can also turn off the lights in your bedroom, light a candle, tonight, and put a mini up next to it. Put it close and then put it far away. See how fast that light recedes. How bright it is and how far away it is. Now, do it in a room that has a secondary source of light. See how that impacts that candlelight and makes it look not as bright. It's all relative. So, Althea says, Carwin, thanks to relativity, no matter how fast the turtle is going in his reference frame, the light is still moving at the speed of light. Yeah, Trash, we don't have time to go into that, but essentially, you've got to think about how the colors interact, right? So if you've got something red, yellow light on it is going to go and take it orangey, right? It's gonna take it more toward the yellow. I did an orange torchlight. I don't have Little Goblin. In David's class, he uses a goblin, one of the Pathfinder goblins, with a torch, and that's a great experiment too, because you can make the colors of the clothes, pick up the light differently. But yes, the color of light will absolutely affect how the underlying color of the object shows. So if you have a blue, like shining, I think the most famous example is if you shine a blue light on a red object, it actually goes black. So you do not kind of have to think about that. I mean, that's a failure in some OSL, is that it just chooses to paint, like a bright green surface with an orange light on it. It chooses to paint the orange light part just straight orange, and then you see the green when it gets out, farther from the model, and that's just not right. So, I mean, some people would argue that at that point it's stylistic versus realistic, right? They would definitely have a realistic light source, but then there is also just flying in the face of physics. So yes, art is art, but also physics is physics, and so hopefully you have a nice marriage of them, so that it doesn't make all the physicists out there want to punch you when they see you painted your model in an inappropriate way. But yes, so depends, Mathophile. Remember, you're talking about nature now, and magic takes all the rules out. So if I have a very, very bright magenta or red light, I can do that in Magic Land. I can do that in real land. I mean, think about police car lights. But yeah, exactly. Inverse square. Yeah, Valandar, exactly. So that's why I'm saying it recedes exponentially. So it really does. And that's probably one of the second biggest mistake we see, right? Is that people will do the same level of light source lighting on every surface, whether it's close in or farther out. If the whole model is metal, you could kind of get away with it just a bit. It'll still recede, but a lot of surfaces are going to reflect the light source strongly if it's a shiny surface. But if it's not a shiny surface, like Mr. Turtle here, yeah, not so much, right? Image of betrayal. There we go. Althea is the expert here in chat. OSL is a kind of Trump trying to fake the eye to see something that's not actually there. So yeah, in line with Althea, yes, in order to achieve the fake the eye effect, you have to follow the rules of physics. You can't just hard wave its art or its magic, right? Exactly, right? Yeah, I do agree with that. Now, that said, I will agree that it does allow you to do a much brighter light. Like in nature, light, a red light source is dimmer, but it does allow you to do a reasonably bright red light source, for example. Magic does. Image, you want the effect to carry. And so you need to do it strongly enough that it carries, but if you don't do it right, then it's not going to look right. So it's kind of like this little bit of teach it one way, teach it the other. You do remember that with miniatures, we are always exaggerating slightly, especially with little ones. Maybe not so much with a bust that's closer to a real scale person, but on a little tiny mini, we are over exaggerating because we're trying to make everything look right. Right? But you still want to follow those rules. You want to follow that the light source is going to be dimmer as it goes farther away. You want to follow those rules of physics, or it doesn't look right. It just looks like a paint can got splashed all over your mini. Right, exactly, Methophile. I mean, you might see this lantern from far off, but it won't be lighting the area you're in. So, yeah, exactly, Optimist. That's exactly it. You have to exaggerate a little bit because it's so small. And it's just like we use lining and darker shadows, higher highlights to bring out things on really tiny miniatures, right? To pop those details. It's because the model is so small, the scale, it just won't cast its own shadows. It won't pick up light naturally. So we have to help it, right? So when we're trying to do this sort of effect, to me, those same rules hold true. You have to exaggerate it a little bit, but you should still be using the rules of physics. You should still be looking at where the light is going to hit and trying to fade it out as it gets further away. And also, as we haven't talked about today, but as David referenced and as other people have asked about, to make sure that if you're using a colored light, you do kind of factor in what color of thing it's landing on, which can complicate your paint job. But I would say that if you're trying to master OSL first, just try to get where is the light actually hitting. That would be the first thing to master. Second, make sure you fade it out. And then third, start learning about how colored light interacts with surfaces that it falls on. So if I had to do this, if I had to break this down for you, those are the steps, I would say. Get confident with where your light is going to hit, then get confident with how you're fading it out to make it look real. And you really just hold it at arm's length and see, does this look real? Does it carry it? Can I see that there's a light source? That sort of thing. So that's the order I would do that in. Even I have to pause sometimes if I'm trying to do a lighting effect and I'm using colored light on a colored surface. So it may be easier for you to start with a white or slightly yellow light, which is more natural like sunlight, and to go that way first. Oh yeah, Valendar. Okay, yeah, I bet Althea could talk about this too. When everything is painted like it's daylight, but then the lantern is still super, super bright, right? Yeah, that's the relative light source, and I did talk about that at the beginning a little bit, and that's why we painted Mr. Turtle like it's evening, so that we could actually show a bit of light source. Because if this was daylight, if Mr. Turtle is actually in daylight, like his shell back here intimates, then this lantern wouldn't have any impact whatsoever. Like, I could still paint the lantern itself very bright, like the bright yellow, but other than, like, the area right around it, like the area up here on the underside of the lid, everything else, like, it would definitely light the underside of the lid because that area is, going to be in shadow from the regular light source, right? If the sun is shining down. So you would see the light source there, but you wouldn't see it all of over here because the sunlight would be so much stronger. No, you mean if you grayscale it, the lit area is super dark. But still has normal colors? Is that what you're talking about? Oh, I see. But they're using a regular red or green, and they're not trying to, like, gray out the colors and see, and like it actually would be. Because that's the other reason we went for gray here, is that, shadow, like lack of illumination does tend to mute colors. And that's just people not, probably wanting not reaching for realism. They get told the rest of the model has to be dark and then they need to use a light source, but they don't think about how light actually acts in the dark, like what colors might show up how. That reds would be really dull. So yeah, this is an awesome model, and actually he's given us a lot this week. For those of you who missed earlier streams, we did different colors of leather. and kind of different patterning and textures on them too. And we also were showing, doing a realistic pattern on the turtle shell back here. Hey, T. McDuff. Thanks for the Tier 1 renew. That's 9 months. That's great. So yeah, so there's just some things to think about with OSL. If I'm going to do a real OSL episode, I really want to do it with a much better model than this representationally, so I can get something that's close to. Let me grab. I did this for my Patreon a while back. I'll use this this time to plug my Patreon. But I did an OSL demo a little bit with just a simple OSL with the glow colors. On things that are right up against the model. Remember how I said it was easier to show a glow? So this is a Dryad from Creepy Tables. She's really awesome. And her bright pink here, this is Runic Glow in white. And I've done the underpainting thing that I did before. I just pretty much layered on some white, did my, painted the bulb white, and then used Runic Glow and glazing Runic Glow, and brought up some sparkles on the inside of the light to make it look like it's glowing. And then I did another one over here where I actually used layering. And you don't see the pink because we've got too light here. Here, well, hold on. There we go. That's better. Now you can see the pink. But yeah, so, and again, remember up here on the plant part, it's going to cut off that light source, right? So you can see that angle. So that sort of thing. So I've covered this a little bit, and I also did another OSL talking about drawing the lines to things and using different example models. So my Patreon is patreon.com/paintingbig. It is my love. I actually just was shooting a video on not overthinking the color wheel yesterday, because people get intimidated by the color wheel. It's actually very simple, so I wanted to do a quick video for my $5 tier on that, so I'm going to be working on editing that today and get it up for you guys. But yeah, so that's the deal. And thank you for tuning in, everybody. I hope you learned a little bit about thinking about OSL, thinking about, let's get all this stuff out of lane. And actually, it's kind of better with a little bit of light. There we go. Your tortoises are offended. Yes, it is a tortoise and not a turtle. You are correct. You'd have to paint the whole thing glowing like it's magic then, Francis. Yes. And I would seriously consider dropping the light down to where it sits like right here, so that you have a nice big area all on this one side that you can OSL. And then the other side would be dim in shadow. You know, so if you wanted to use this model to do it, that's what I would do. I would probably just pin the lantern in a different place, maybe down low on the side. And then I would be able to use that OSL on all of this area and make it quite strong where it's right behind the turtle, so it would carry it. And then it would fade out as it gets, you know, to the front of his head, down to the feet. Fades out, only hits the edges back here on the pack. You know, this would be a very, actually, I think, a fun OSL. Because then this is metal, maybe it's a pot, so it'll reflect. You know, maybe the little buckles will reflect a little longer. This bottle will reflect. You know, so... This is much better and much more interesting placement for this lantern. So, and really, it's bones, guys. You can cut it up and reposition it anywhere you want. So, do so. Run out. Have fun. Follow the physics. Yes. Lots of 2D artists represent nighttime colors as bluer. It works reasonably well, even if it doesn't follow the physics. Yeah. Technically, moonlight is green. If you follow James Gurney, if you read his... Color and Light book. Moonlight has a greenish tinge rather than a bluish tinge, which can be funky. But yeah. Shadows do turn blue outside during the day under sunlight. Glenn. Very blue. Extremely blue. Our eye doesn't always interpret it that way, but if you look at a white stripe at a parking lot on a sunlit day, if that's in shadow with a car right next to it, you will see that it is actually a very intense blue-gray. Very blue. I actually mixed a color for that color. It never got produced. It's probably still sitting in a sample bucket at Reaper, but I did actually make it. It was a glazing color, and it was called Sky Shadow. But it is very, very blue. Technically, moonlight is red if you measure its spectrum. Let's not get too crazy here. Let's not do it. Let's not go there, Althai. Let's not. Not unless you're prepared to come on here and make a stream about the physics of moonlight. Oh my god. Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll go and rework the original batch is so old I'd want to do a fresh batch at this point. But Sky Shadow is a very intense blue with a bit of black in it. It's a thinned application color, so it's meant to be glazed over things. But yeah, I wanted a way to do realistic shadows under sunlight, so I made the color. Why not, right? I have the power. Drunk with power. So hey, Justin, do we have a raid or something? Because we're having too much
Yes,
fun.
we do.
We're having too much fun.
Yes, we do. In fact, I found a raid that's kind of cheeky, and I say that because this person is a painter,
Yeah.
and she is painting miniature paintings. So
Oh
she's a
yeah,
miniature
she's a
painter,
miniature painter. Yeah, because if you look up
but
miniature paintings, then you can find there's a genre of that. Yes.
absolutely. So I thought you might enjoy that, and her artwork's really cool. So
Okay, awesome. That sounds awesome. You know I love it when you raid 2D painters. Guys, go see this person. Make sure she knows about miniatures, like our 3D miniatures instead of her 2D miniatures, right? This is crossover. Maybe she'll pick up minis if she doesn't already have them.
all right. Her name is Mighty May. So let's
All right,
give her a
super.
warm Reaper welcome. And since she paints, yeah, she paints miniature paintings. Why don't you guys tell her about miniatures? It might be right up her alley.
All righty. Everybody ready? Thank you, Alfie.
Yeah. Don't forget, guys, today we have Painting Platinum at 3, and then we have Reaper Live at 6.
All righty.
Day full of programming.
Yes, go have fun, everybody. Go say hi to this miniature painting painter. And I will talk to you. Remember, AMA tomorrow and giveaway. Be here or be square. That didn't rhyme. Oh
Yes.
well. Bye.
Thank you guys very much. Keep being awesome. That's the important takeaway here. And I will talk to you guys a little bit. See ya.